Hey children, so tonight we're working on deciding whether or not a system of equations has parallel lines, perpendicular lines, or if the lines are not related in either of those ways, so neither parallel nor perpendicular. And we should remember that the way that we decide whether or not two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither is to compare their slopes. So when you're looking at these equations, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, can you determine from the way the equations are already written, can you determine their slopes? So if I look at the first equation, let's just call it blue equation, I can't see the slope here because this is in slope-intercept form. So I have y equals mx plus b, which means m is 1/3, which means my slope for the first equation, blue equation, is 1/3. But if you take a look at the second equation, let's call it green equation, okay? This is not written in slope-intercept form. In fact, this is written in standard form because I have x and y on the same side and a number on the other side, which means in order to get this into slope-intercept form, I would actually need to solve it. So if you see, I already made a mistake here. The slope for the first one was 1/3. I think I said 1/3, but I wrote 1/2 for some reason. Okay, so coming back to the second equation, I need to solve this for y. So if I'm solving this equation for y, I want to get rid of the x term. This is a positive x term, so I'm going to take away x. I'm going to take away x. I'm left with negative 3y equals negative x plus 3. And the last thing I would need to do is divide everything by negative 3. And that gives me y equals, well, I know in front of this x is really a 1. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I know this is 1/3 x minus 1. And now I can identify what the slope is here. The slope for this equation would be 1/3. So now this brings me to my comparison. My slope for the first equation was 1/3 and my slope for the second equation was 1/3. So what I'm seeing is that these two slopes are the same, and I know if the slopes are the same, then the lines are parallel. So I'm going to write parallel lines and put a box around it. Okay. So let's take a look at one more problem and then I'll leave you to do the rest by yourself. If you take a look at problem 4, this is an interesting one because neither the first equation nor the second equation are solved for y. Both of these equations are in standard form, which means both of these equations need to be solved for y. So let's take this first equation. 3x plus 2y equals 8. The first step in solving for y is to get rid of the x term. So I take away the x term from each side. And I'm left with 2y equals negative 3x plus 8. And then the last thing I need to do to solve for y is divide everything by the coefficient that it's in front of y, the number in front of y. So I get y equals negative 3/2 x plus 4. Now once it's in slope-intercept form, I can easily write down that the slope is negative 3/2. Now this is what I want to compare with the second equation once I solve that one also for y. So if we take a look at the second equation, I have 2x plus 3y equals negative 12. Again, if I'm solving this, I want to get rid of my x term on both sides. So I'm left with 3y equals negative 2x minus 12. And then I want to divide everything by 3. And I'm left with y equals negative 2/3 x minus 4. Now here I can also write down what my slope is. M equals negative 2/3. And here comes a point where I need to compare these two. Okay? So if I'm looking at these two equations, the slope here is negative 2/3 and the slope here is negative 3/2. Okay? So I know they're not the same, so these are not parallel. The only other option is that they're perpendicular or neither. Okay, perpendicular means they have to be opposite reciprocals. Okay, opposite referring to the sign. Well, this is a negative and this is also a negative. So these are not opposites. Since these are not opposites, I know this is also not perpendicular. So if it's not parallel and it's not perpendicular, that means it is neither. That means they are just random lines crossing in the night. They don't cross in a special way and they don't travel the same direction. They're just neither. Okay? You have 4 problems you can solve by yourself. A couple of them, some of the equations are solved for y already. So for example, this equation on number 5 and this equation on number 3. The other ones you will need to solve for y in order to identify the slope and make a comparison. Okay? I will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.